This is a tiny piece of metal just 3 millimeters across, and here's what happens if you just keep zooming in. 1,000 times, 100,000 times, 50 million times. Each of these blobs is an actual atom. I saw this the other day at the University of Sydney, and it kind of blew my mind, because up until just 30 years ago, directly seeing atoms like this was thought to be impossible.
The rooms that you're going to see here are perhaps the most shielded rooms on campus, or even in the whole of Sydney, I would say, and perhaps also the most expensive.
That's wild.
So why is it so hard to see atoms?
Well, you can't actually see atoms with visible light. That's because while light has wavelengths between 380 and 750 nanometers, an atom is still over 3,000 times smaller, just 0.1 nanometers. And if the wavelength of light is much bigger than the thing you're trying to see, the light will just diffract or bend around it, so you won't be able to see it.
So if you want to see atoms, you need something with a much, much smaller wavelength. The best candidate isn't even light. It's electrons. In 1924, a French physicist named Louis de Broglie worked out that everything was sort of wave-like. Not just light, but matter too. Atoms, molecules, even you yourself have a wavelength.
And the formula for this wavelength is Planck's constant divided by the object's momentum, that is, mass times velocity.
So here what you actually see, that's the column of the microscope where we accelerate the 300 kV electrons down.
300 kilovolts, these electrons.
Yes. So they are relativistic particles.
How fast are they moving? 99% the speed of light, or?
Well, around 80.
80% the speed of light.
Yeah.
So what would be their wavelength?
The wavelength is the Planck constant over the momentum, right? So if we calculate that, we come to around between 2 to 3 picometers.
Whoa!
Yeah.
That's over 100,000 times smaller than visible light, so theoretically, you get 100,000 times more resolution. Shortly after de Broglie's discovery, a group of scientists in Germany started working on a microscope that would use these high-speed electrons.
The only problem is you can't bend electrons using glass lenses. So how do you focus them?
Hans Busch, a German physicist, suggested that an electromagnetic lens might do the trick. He published his results in 1926, but never actually built one. Fortunately, a copy of his paper fell into the hands of an eager young PhD student, Ernst Ruska. Ruska built his first prototype by coiling up some wire and surrounding it with iron, taking care to leave a gap in the middle. Then, when he passed a current through the coil, it induced a donut-shaped magnetic field through the metal and across this gap. This was his lens. To test it, Ruska first boiled electrons off a tungsten filament, the same kind of filament you'd find in an incandescent light bulb. He accelerated these free electrons through a positively charged anode down to his electromagnetic lens. As an electron approaches the lens, the magnetic field exerts a force on it. So if an electron is traveling in the y direction and the magnetic fields